I've been there more than once, stuck at home during a week-long power outage and subsisting mostly on peanut butter and crackers because I had no idea how to safely cook indoors without my electric range or toaster oven. Finally, desperate for a morning cup of coffee, warm scrambled eggs, or a hearty bowl of steaming chili, I researched my options for safe and effective power outage cooking. Did I want too much? After doing my homework, I decided that canned heat cooking made sense for somebody like me. For instance, I learned that the fuel, a small stove, and a couple of lighters were easy to store and cheap to stock. Like me, you should find canned fuel simple to use, safe to use with reasonable precautions, and effective enough for modest cooking needs. Pishweki. In this video, I'll explain canned heat and talk about why I chose this increasingly popular grid-down cooking method. I also included a few alternative ways to cook with canned gel fuel so you can explore your choices. Of course, I'll emphasize the importance of safety when cooking during a power outage. At the end, I'll also cover the pros and cons of some alternative grid-down cooking methods I've considered, just in case those might serve you better. What is canned heat? You might hear this common heating fuel referred to as Sterno, which is a popular brand name that has slipped into common usage. Some people might refer to it more generally as canned fuel gel. The alcohol-based gel usually comes in sealed cans. After you unscrew the lid, you can light the wick. You can also put out the flame by suffocating it with the lid, reseal the can, and use the can until it's empty. That's pretty simple, right? For further reassurance, you've probably noticed these little cans burning under chafing dishes at nice restaurants. That's certainly the first use I thought of when somebody mentioned Sterno. In fact, I was surprised to learn that lots of preppers and campers also consider fuel gel a convenient backup source of emergency cooking and heating. Instead of using a chafing dish, cooking happens on a purchased or do-it-yourself canned heat stove that's designed for this purpose. Is canned heat the best option for cooking during a power outage? You're probably not going to roast a turkey, though I've heard some incredible claims that it's possible with the right setup and skill. You can boil water or even cook an egg in a reasonable amount of time, say 15 or 20 minutes. During the lousy days right after disasters, I'm not trying to prepare a three-course meal, just some hot water for my instant oatmeal. How much canned heat should you stock for an emergency? Expect a standard 7-ounce can of fuel to last over 2 hours. Since I can extinguish the flame after use, a can usually lasts me over a day with periodic use. You can even find larger cans that are advertised to last as long as 6 hours. Sometimes you'll even see tiny cans at dollar stores. I typically stock up on a 6-pack of standard cans for about $20, figuring the fuel should last me at least a week for light cooking and warming. You may feel comfortable with larger or smaller cans or a bigger or smaller stockpile. With any open flame, you should still take the reasonable precautions of having a gas detector, a fire extinguisher, and good ventilation. If needed, you might even want to crack a window when you're cooking. What's my grid-down cooking setup for indoors? I ended up buying a folding camping stove made for canned heat. You can find one for about $12 online or in the camping section of many retailers. Folded flat in the box, the stove does not take up much more room than a tablet computer, so it's easy to stash on my emergency shelf with a case of fuel and a pack of disposable lighters. You'll also want to invest in a small and lightweight pan or pot, though sometimes I just stick an open can of chili or soup right on the stove. Just be sure to remove labels from any food cans you use to reduce the fire hazard. You might also need a couple of utensils for flipping or stirring and an oven mitt for safety. Again, I strongly suggest buying a gas detector and fire extinguisher. When I cook, I also cover a sturdy surface with foil to protect it, If weather permits, I crack a window slightly to maintain my indoor atmosphere. What about higher-end canned heat stoves like the Vesta? I have not taken the plunge, but the Vesta canned heat stove caught my eye. This high-end Sterno stove looks like a handy tool for camping or grid-down survival. People buy stoves like this for both heating and cooking. I'll post a link in the description so you can check it out. These luxury Sterno stoves are considerably pricier than traditional folding camp stoves and can cost over $100. They can also use multiple large cans at one time to produce more heat, which also costs more money. Your decision to upgrade really depends upon your needs. For example, my own cooking style during power outages is pretty modest. I've also experienced mostly summertime blackouts, so I'd rather not warm up the house. Your own decision might depend on your budget for emergency supplies and your own anticipated needs. What if you don't want to buy a fuel gel stove at all? I decided to get a folding stove, but some preppers come up with resourceful ways to rig their own do-it-yourself Sterno setup. The manufactured stoves are lightweight, easy to store, and extremely affordable. They're not bad to have around for camping or picnics, too. For the die-hard do-it-yourself crowd, there's the can stove method. You just take the top and bottom off of an empty can that's large enough to set over the top of your lit can of fuel gel. You'll need to punch a few holes in the side near the top, and you can string through wires from a coat hanger to make a little base to set a small mug or even another can with food you want to heat. Personally, I'd go with using a pot to hold the fuel can. I would put a lightweight grill or rack over the top after lighting the wick. Finally, I can place a smaller pan on top. It's heavier and more stable than relying on an empty can. You can always borrow the top from a small BBQ or use a cookie cooling rack if you don't have a small grate. Would you also like to explore other backup cooking ideas? For instance, why not just cook outside on the BBQ? Sure, I have a small grill and a stock of charcoal. I've also thought about buying a solar oven. Just remember, the grid-down disasters I've experienced have involved days of storms, so I needed to wait before venturing outside. It's also usually pretty wet and nasty outside, so I couldn't expect charcoal or a solar oven to perform well. What about butane? Honestly, a lot of folks would go with an indoor-rated butane stove for an experience that's more like cooking on a traditional electric stove. You can find indoor-rated butane stoves on the market, and many restaurants or even home cooks use them for portability or certain cooking styles like hot pots. You can stock up on an indoor butane stove plus a few bottles of butane gas for less than $40 or $50. The setup will absolutely help you cook more food faster than a folding Sterno stove or homemade solution. If you're like me, you're still somewhat leery of the risk of CO, so good ventilation and a CO monitor are critical. I'm also not keen to store bottles of potentially explosive gas at home. Personally, I'd rather cook a little less, so long as I don't have to worry as much. What about tea light warmers? You've probably seen little candle warmers that can keep a mug of tea warm or melt scented wax. Some preppers make outrageous claims about the effectiveness of this solution. In my opinion, they are great for keeping coffee or tea warm, but if you want to heat water from scratch, it will probably take at least 3 tea lights in half an hour or more. If you want to boil rice, expect to wait a long time. Try it out for fun before relying on it during an emergency. Why not just use small electric kettles and backup power generation? If you can spend a bit more, you could buy a small electric warmer and pair it with a power station. Just remember, even low-watt warmers can use up your reserve power pretty quickly. For example, a 450-watt warmer or a 300-watt kettle can drain your 500-watt-hour battery station in a relatively short time. You're also going to need that power to keep your lights, phones, and radios running during a grid-down situation. You can't use your small solar panel to recharge at night or on a very overcast day. If I had a giant 3,000 watt-hour power station and an array of solar panels, I might consider it. Since I only have a couple of smaller power stations and one lonely solar panel, I've tabled that solution. Let's face it, an extra case of canned heat costs a lot less than a major alternative energy upgrade, though it's a goal of mine. I love my solar power station, but I understand its limitations. By the way, I've published a video on this channel that will help you figure out what a typical power station can run and how long the power will last. What about the idle power source you've got sitting in your driveway? You could also use your car with an adapter to warm up morning coffee, but that means burning gasoline that might be hard to replace in a long disaster. You'd also have to wait until it's safe to go outside. And no, you don't want to run your car in a closed garage because of the risk of toxic fumes. The car is a great backup for temporary heating up or cooling off, but I'd use it sparingly if possible. Canned heat makes a lot of sense. Just use sensible precautions. When you plan for grid-down cooking, make sure you store fuel safely, following package instructions, and check expiration dates. It seems like every time a disaster strikes, I read news about disasters that happen after the disaster because of open flames. Please take basic precautions. A gas detector, good ventilation, and a fire extinguisher should always be part of your power outage safety plan. Protect tabletops and counters with foil or sheet pans to ensure they're not stained or damaged. Store fuel according to the manufacturer's instructions and pay attention to expiration dates. Finally, I hope you connect with the channel. Please share your own safe indoor cooking ideas for a grid-down emergency in the comments. I check every comment and reply to most. Your ideas help keep our community informed, safer, and with some of you guys amused. If you gained anything from this video, I'd really appreciate a like. And hey, as long as you are clicking things, why not subscribe so we can stay in touch? Stay safe